So here's record. And like I said, I'll keep trying to get you live here.
Welcome to M Squared Techcast, a live internet radio show offering the latest news and interviews with the people driving business, technology, and politics in Michigan. Now, your hosts, Matt Roush and Mike Brennan.
Hey, it's Matt Roush.
And Mike Brennan.
And we're back after a week off last week for Memorial Day with another edition of the M Squared Techcast here at mitechnews.tv.
One of these days we'll have to get that entry or the intro recorded again because it doesn't really reflect all the changes. But we do like Foster's voice so well that we've just kept it. I mean, how can you duplicate or replicate Foster's voice, right?
Yeah, God rest his soul. He had one of the original sets of pipes in the radio business, that's for sure.
Indeed. So we have calling all the way in from Florida. I'm not sure. We were somewhere near, was it not Fort Myers? You're north of there, right, Gary?
Yeah, Sarasota, south of Tampa.
Okay, Sarasota.
Okay.
All right.
Beautiful area.
Yes.
That's great.
So Gary Erickson from his executive search partners, he's the managing partner. Well, let's start off with your big news you sent me this morning because it's not on our talking points, and so I didn't share that with Matt or that engineer behind the scenes here who might want to know this. So tell us a little bit about what your news is this morning, Gary.
Well, for the third year, Forbes has named us one of the top executive search companies in America, which is wonderful. And we moved up from number 2017, we were number 200. We're now number 59, and we're number 1 in Michigan. So it's great.
Wow.
Great news. Now, a little. I don't know. We're really small, so it's quite an honor to even be part of this list with some of the really big guys like Korn Ferry and Russell Reynolds and A.T. Kearney and others. So
sure. All right. So one of the things we wanted to talk about is this pandemic has impacted everybody, everywhere, doing everything. And so we were kind of curious how it has impacted your business, or maybe on the flip side, people are still looking for jobs out there, C-level people. But I know talking to other headhunters, a lot of those jobs have been put on hold. I don't know what the situation is with you guys. Have you experienced a downturn or?
Yeah, a significant downturn. Now it's partially due to the markets that we focused in on, which is Detroit with its strong auto focus has been one of our primary markets. The West Coast has been another. The West Coast still remains strong, but Detroit has gone to almost nothing. We typically have 15 to 25 searches underway at this time each year, and we're down to 3.
Ooh.
So, and none of them. There's only one in Detroit.
Okay, so what industries have been hardest hit in this downturn?
Well, I think some of the more obvious ones like automotive has really been hit hard. I think I talked to a lot of people who are at auto suppliers who have been furloughed, and they're not sure when they're going to be coming back. And then you've got real estate, who wants to buy a office building anymore or manage one because people are going to work more from home. You've got travel's has been reduced, hospitality, restaurants, hotels. Those are the areas that I think are hard. They are the hardest hit, and I think will continue to remain down for quite a while. What do you guys think? It seems to be what's the new normal going to look like?
Yeah, I wish I knew.
That's a very good question. One of the things I think that this has told us is that a lot of office jobs don't really need to be office jobs. Like what I do for a living at Lawrence Technological University is basically, I call people up on the phone, I take notes on what they say, and I turn those interviews into articles for alumni magazines and websites. I don't need to be in the office for that. The only thing I need to be around for physically is taking pictures of events and the occasional collaborative meeting, which we now do on Zoom like this. So, taking pictures of events is the only, I mean, and I think there's a lot of jobs like that, but there's also a lot of jobs where you have to have, personal contact with people face to face. And it's going to be really interesting to see how those jobs ramp back up. Everything from, say, dental and medical practices to, shopping. Some people still like to look at clothes before they buy them. I mean, I
Well,
really
and
don't
then
know.
the other thing is, are they going to let you try the clothes on?
Oh, no
Right?
kidding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that one. Yeah.
Well, I know the dental offices here in Michigan, I think it's this week that they're going to allow them to begin to reopen. Same thing with the physicians' offices. Um, but I mean, a dentist has his hands in your mouth.
Yeah.
So,
Doesn't get more intimate than that.
yeah,
It really doesn't.
that's about as like dicey as it gets in this new world, right? So I don't know. I guess the gloves but even so, I mean, they can't
Well,
be 6 feet away if their arms aren't that long.
Yeah.
dentists have been careful for a very long time about this stuff. I mean, at least the dentist I go to is, everybody's got, face shields and masks, and they had all that stuff on before this even happened. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So getting back to if someone is out there, I mean, maybe are you guys? Let's start with you, Gary. Are you gonna maybe expand beyond Michigan? Is that one way to cope with the fact that Michigan's dried up here, or what?
Well, we do searches nationwide, but historically about 50% have come from Michigan, or 40% Michigan, 40% West Coast, and then we get scattering of jobs in other areas. And I expect that'll happen. But that's a good question. I'm beginning to think about how we get more of our presence in front of other people. Now that can all be done remotely, of course. I don't have to physically be there. And we as an organization have been participating in online CIO events put on by primarily HMG Strategies. One of my partners and I are part of panels. So maybe that'll help.
Okay. Now, if somebody out there, I mean, I imagine job searches are still going on. And some of these people, I don't know whether the C-level people would be laid off, but certainly a lot of other people aren't going to be returning to their old jobs whenever the new normal, whenever that is. But I mean, at your level that you're searching for, are you seeing these jobs just simply going away?
It's a good question. I don't think the jobs are going away. I think in companies have cut back in positions. The CFOs have said, I want to wait to see what happens on the other side of this before I authorize commitment for new hires and, new capital investments. So I think it's delayed hiring. And the question is, when is it going to come back? But it's also dependent on different industries too. Let me make a comment about what I though think is the good news here. If you think about who are the heroes of this pandemic, clearly it's the frontline workers, the doctors and nurses, the people who are doing deliveries. It's the people who are keeping us safe. But think about what's behind all of that. And I think the people are going to recognize the second heroes in this whole pandemic are the technology people. All right. Can you name a company that has been able to survive without a comprehensive and flexible IT plan? Right?
Yeah.
How many companies have been able to pivot to work at home so quickly? All right. How are so many of us be able to stay at home and still do shopping, still do telemed, if you will, which we've done. And when you think about who made that happen, it's technology people. And I think the people that, when I think about leaders for the future, and jobs coming back, I think the demand for technology people who have led through the pandemic, who have created the environment for this kind of quick pivot, who understand what can happen to the company, are the kind of people that are going to be in increasing demand. And I think that's going to start coming back, I hope, in the next 3 or 4 months.
So Gary, that's a good segue to the next question I had for you, which was, if you are indeed looking for employment these days, how does one go about making your background fit this new normal?
Well, I've got one piece of advice. There's sort of two conflicting things here. Most companies, when we do search, are looking for people with an experience in their particular industry. And yet, if you look at certain industries that might be going down, like I said, the commercial real estate, maybe automotive, all right, hospitality and things like that, where maybe we're not going to see the jobs come back as quickly. I don't know how people pivot as easily from those jobs into other areas. But the advice I have to people now who are looking for jobs is, first thing you need to do is start thinking about how what you have done has enabled companies to survive or thrive through this pandemic. All right. What have you done to help your company become more digitally present, if you will? How have you been able to help your company do more remote work, do more remote delivery, do more and better logistics, and whatever it is? Start writing those success stories down about what you did and what the results are. And you can start creating, I think, a compelling case for why maybe other companies should consider you for a job that might be outside their industry.
Interesting. Yeah, because again, it gets to, well, that's it. I mean, people that are solving these problems, this problem is not going to go away anytime soon.
No.
I think it's going to be with us until maybe this time next year. Hopefully the vaccines will get out sooner than that, but we don't know. Hopefully the antibody testing will get out sooner than that, so you can figure out who's had it, who can go back to work, who's safe. But that's anybody's guess. So yeah, it really is best practices. I mean, what did you do to keep your company functioning when everybody had to do it virtually, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think part of this pivoting, if you will, to a new industry or being able to explain your capabilities, I think you also have to educate yourself as to what others have done, and think about how that, what others, I mean, going to these online conferences, reading what people are talking about that they had to do to get their company to just even survive,
right.
and some that are even thriving through this, and then start thinking about what do you think each of these industries is going to look like on the other side of this. And I think we've got some early indicators of that, because there's some successful companies out there. You know, more work at home, more home delivery, more telepresence, if you, whatever that is. It could be stuff like what we're doing now with remote meetings. It could be telemed. I don't see teledentistry. That might be a little challenging, but.
Yeah. All right, now take the pliers and put them inside.
Yeah, right. Yeah, put the robot over here, and
yeah.
Right.
No,
So Gary, I know Gary, like all job search experts, you've always been a huge proponent of networking whenever you can, and really what networking is all about is giving of yourself to others. And how do you do that in this current environment where there aren't, Bob and Dave's pink slip parties anymore? There aren't events like that anymore.
Well,
how do you go about doing that?
Well, it's networking is all about contacting people and offering your help or asking them for help. And then the key to every network is to stay in touch with people and think of it as a two-way street. Reach out to the top 30 or 40 people that are in your networks. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them if you can help them. And they'll ask you the same kind of thing. And then maybe reach out to them and say, what are you finding? What do you think the new normal is? I think engaging your network in a productive conversation that helps educate you and helps educate them is if nothing else, getting you ready for when the job market turns around.
Okay, we've only got about a minute left, so go ahead and do the plug here, Gary. Tell people how they can reach out to you, find your website, that sort of thing. And hopefully we'll get you to higher up in the rankings here for next year, right? So.
Okay, yeah. Well, our website is execsearchpartners.com. And one of the recommendations we make, we have a document out there called 12 Steps for a Highly Successful Job Search. And download that and download a sample resume. One of the keys to presenting yourself for any job is to have a resume that looks like you're as strong a fit for that position as possible. And we have a revised resume format and some revised advice in our 12 steps that we've added this year about how to improve your chances of being considered based on the resume alone.
All right. Thanks very much, Gary Erickson from Executive Search Partners. Enjoy that weather down in Florida.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Thank you very much. Been able to get out regularly.
All right. We'll be back in just a minute with another segment of the M Squared Techcast. For right now, it's Matt Roush.
And Mike Brennan.
And you're watching at mitechnews.tv, Facebook, and PodcastDetroit.com.
Lawrence Technological.
Okay.
Earn a degree and a higher starting salary. In fact, when it comes
Oh, there she is. Okay. I was just going to say, is
Yeah.
Kelly joined us? So,
Yes.
all right, stand
Hi.
by. We're on commercial. I'll be out of here in about 45 seconds.
Grads,
Okay.
the highest of any university in America. Plan a campus visit to meet with counselors, faculty, and coaches. Why wait? Find out more at ltu.edu.
What do you get at Lawrence Technological University? Everything. Great labs and software, support professors, plus a full campus life,
lost her.
NAIA athletics, and all the software
Oh,
you
there
need
she
to
is.
succeed. Be smart. Be more. At LTU, possible is everything.
Salaries of Lawrence Tech grads are among the highest of any university in America. Plan a campus visit to meet with counselors, faculty, and coaches. Why wait? Find out more at ltu.edu.
And we're back. Go
Hi,
ahead,
it's Matt Roush,
Yes. And I'm Mike Brennan.
and we're back with another
You know,
segment.
we're
of
like,
the
we
M
get
Squared.
body language, we nudge each other, but doing this, we're a little spread out. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
we got two images of Kelly here. So,
Oh,
all right.
my computer connected, I guess.
Yeah.
Finally.
we've
Oh,
got
here we go.
Stereo Kelly. Okay.
All right. Let's go with this with the computer one. That's a little higher quality than your.
Yeah, I was having issues.
Oh, there we go. Oh, you're
Uh-oh.
muted. You got to unmute yourself. Okay, you there?
Yes. I was having issues with my Wi-Fi. Everybody in New York is in one building at home working. So the bandwidth, it's like, oh, this is perfect timing.
Okay. Well, Kelly Robinson is the founder of the Kelly Robinson team in New York City. And I'm connected through her, as a disclaimer, through some partnerships that I have with Kate O'Hara and some other folks, Karen Black and things, and other people like that. So, but we thought we wanted to get her on the show because what we're trying to do is show how various companies or industries, groups, whoever, are dealing with the new normal, whatever that might be, and we're trying to define that ourselves. But
Yeah, we're still trying to figure it out.
yeah, Kelly's a big-time real estate developer there, and a realtor, I should say, in New York City. And I'm kind of curious, Kelly, how has this impacted your business?
Well, it's been quite an interesting time. In-person showings are currently illegal in New York City. And it's not like you can drive by a house and look in the windows. So, you've got to walk into a building with somebody. Most showings, you don't give a lockbox, or, the buyer doesn't pick up a key with their broker. The listing agent is showing the property to everybody, unlike many places. And so what we've done is a lot of us have created virtual tours and video tours, and a lot of people are now requesting those when they inquire on a listing. Things have slowed down quite a bit. People don't want to necessarily buy something that they can't see in person. But we have gotten some sight unseen deals done, which has been quite interesting.
I bet.
Yeah, I can't imagine walking into a home and that would be the first time you're physically there is after you've already purchased the thing. That's something genuinely new, I would think.
I've seen it more with investors buying sight unseen, where it's more about the numbers for them of the type, the type of rent they can get.
Yeah. So is the coronavirus driving down prices? Because what I'm hearing here in Michigan is the real estate bubble is kind of burst. A lot of people are looking to unload property as quickly as they can to free up cash. Same thing going on where you are?
So at the beginning, there were some desperate sellers who were just eager to take a deal, not knowing where this was going to go, when we were going to open up, and what was going to happen. So there were some really good deals to be had. New York City has been soft with regards to residential real estate for about 2 years yet. So we really are at the bottom right now, in my opinion. But since the pandemic started, a lot of people pulled their properties off of the market. And in the spring, in New York City is the busiest time for real estate in Manhattan. And so while we typically see in April about 2,000 new listings come on the market, and in May about 2,000 more new listings come on the market, we've seen a lot of people remove their properties from the market and then only about 70 per week have been coming on the market. So it's been interesting because the lack of supply has been outpacing the lack of demand, and it's actually pushed prices up about 1%.
Really? Huh,
Hmm.
interesting.
It's bizarre, but it's happened. I've gotten quite a few contracts out at or around an asking price recently, which was surprising to me.
Hmm.
But that's in part because the inventory is extremely limited, so it's good old
Right.
supply and demand at work again, right?
Exactly. People still need shelter. It's a primitive need. People are still going to have to be here for work when things open back up, or they currently are. And there also have been quite a few people who have inquired on listings that are for sale and asked if the owner would be willing to rent. So a lot of people who are thinking of buying are now renting because they don't want to make an investment again on something that they can't see in person. So the rental prices have gone up.
Yeah, we're kind of seeing that around here too. Rental prices are edging up. People are hedging their bets, and it gets back to I'm not going to buy a house that I haven't thoroughly toured and examined and had my inspectors in looking at and everything else, right?
Yeah.
Well, plus people's employment prospects are probably a little shaky at the moment, so they may want to rent to maintain more flexibility.
That's true. And then in New York, we also have cooperatives, and that makes up about 70% of what's for sale. And if you don't have a certain income, whether a bank will give you a loan or not, or you're not employed, you can get turned down by the board. And not be able to buy it. And you could be in contract for 3 months or more waiting for that to happen, just to be told no.
Jeez.
So that's another thing that's kind of unique to New York.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. How do you see the market going forward? I know no one really, we just had the same conversation in the last segment. No one really knows how long it'll last, the ultimate damage will be done. But certainly, I don't think we're going to go back to the way it was before the pandemic, right?
No, open houses in New York are a really big thing. And we've been doing them virtually right now with the owner showing and us on a Zoom call, kind of guiding people through as the owner shows. I think there will be more virtual open houses that we will host in the future. And I think, it's now it's illegal to have multiple people there at one time. You have to take people up one by one once we open back up. You have to sanitize everything before, you have to sanitize everything after. I personally will make people wear masks and gloves, and I will open all doors and everything for them. One thing that I think is going to change going forward is I think that our process here is so complicated, and it can take 3 to 6 months to close on a property. And I think things are going to get a little bit more streamlined. There's a lot of paperwork here, and I think a lot more of that will be online going forward. For the time being, notaries are allowed to do virtual notarizations, and virtual closings are happening. So I think that's something that will continue into the future. People won't all want to be sitting very close to each other in the same room for a long time at a closing table.
So is your business strictly in Manhattan, or are you in other boroughs in, say, New Jersey or Connecticut as well?
I focus on Manhattan. The company that I work for, Compass, they have offices all over the country. I do have team members who focus on Brooklyn. I do a little bit in Brooklyn. I have team members who focus on Queens and some of the other boroughs as well.
Now, I know yours is a very unique situation vis-a-vis real estate around the country, but how do you've been doing this a long time. How do you see other realtors around the country, not just in the very large cities like Detroit, Chicago, New York, but I mean, just real estate in general? Do you see a lot of the stuff that you're doing carrying over to the smaller communities, rural communities?
I'm not, it's so different here in Manhattan than it is in rural communities. But I do think that a lot of people are going to be buying larger homes or second homes in rural communities, just to have a place to escape to. I think here, outdoor space is private outdoor space in your apartment is going to be a big thing. I also think that people will probably start taking more professional photos outside of the city, and they will also start doing video tours of properties outside of the city. Maybe listing agents will start to come to the showings outside of the city so that they can sanitize everything before and after.
I'm curious, this may be an opportunity for tech companies or software companies. What services, tech services, would you like to see to make remote showings better? What do you see as the gaps in the technology?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. So the company that I work for was actually a disruptor, and they started out as a tech company and a real estate company. So they're using a lot of, they're building some things right now and using a lot of artificial intelligence. I think I would like to see, more virtual reality type things, where people can walk through the space with virtual reality. I think that might end up happening at some point.
I think it might be a ways off. I know there's a lot of AI in development, but it's not particularly well developed yet. But certainly, but AI in general, just to sort through a lot of things, to answer questions, to do processing information, that's getting very, very big. The headsets you'd have to wear. I mean, they had the Google Glass. That was quite a few years
10
ago.
years ago. Yeah, that's 10 years ago.
A lot of people
yeah.
are really uncomfortable wearing the goggle headset kind of thing. So we needed some compromise between Google Glass and the full headset. I don't know what that is yet, but I think that's
I don't
coming.
know, but I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be interesting. It would be interesting to be able to show people a space as it is, and then have them overlay like their furniture or a new paint color or a new wall covering or something like that, new window treatments on the space.
For sure. And there's definitely technology to do that. There, virtual staging and whatnot. I think that will get more advanced in the near future.
All right. So any other big changes you see on the horizon for either for what you're doing or real estate in general?
I think really what I said, I think that, like you said, I think there needs to be more technology, and I think that's going to happen. I think my company specifically is working on a lot of those things. But I do think that there will be more virtual showings just going forward, at least for the near future, until people start to get more comfortable.
Matt, do you have anything?
Yeah, and the thing that will make them feel more comfortable is effective treatment or a vaccine. I mean, that's where we're at right now, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
all right. So if people want to get a hold of you for more information, how do they do that?
They can contact me at kelly.robinson@compass.com. That's Kelly with a Y.
Okay. Well, thanks for being on the show today, Kelly. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Okay. And we'll be back shortly with our prognosticator of prognosticators, Fred Brown.
Yes.
Hopefully there'll be cheerier news. So that I don't know. Fred's our infectious disease expert.
Yeah, he's been working in these pandemic preparation for 30 years now, so he is kind of in his element right now, and he scared the hell out of us 2 months ago, and hopefully things are better now. We'll be back in just a minute. Until then, it's Matt Roush
and Mike Brennan,
and you're watching the M Squared Techcast at mitechnews.tv.
Lawrence,
thanks, Kelly.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning.
Oh, no problem.
Right,
we'll edit around those. So.
It's nice to meet you.
There's Fred.
All right, speaking of the devil, not the devil, but that's Fred there in the corner. So.
Hi guys, how's everything going?
Good.
Good.
So we're having a little issues with Facebook today because all the reporters apparently are using Facebook to cover the riots. So.
Oh boy.
Did you see my note in the chat, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I logged out as you, logged in as me, and I got it live on the Podcast Detroit pages.
Ah, okay, cool. So we are live then.
At LTU, possible is everything.
So apparently, Mike, the problem is you. Yeah, we gotta take this. We gotta take this personally. So.
Okay, well, the U would be M2 Techcast, where we've been parking all these things. So.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right.
So you get a whole half hour to enlighten us today, Fred.
Wow. Don't know what I'm gonna say. We have to find out when you answer the questions.
Yeah.
I could talk a little bit about warp speed, which is sort of interesting, and maybe about Merck's entry into the whole space, which is interesting. And we want to talk a little about the workspace, the work, right?
Yep.
All right. Yep. And let's introduce you officially now.
I think we are live. Okay.
Okay.
Hey,
Hello,
it's Mike Brennan.
All right, it's Matt Roush, and we're back. So we're
Yes,
back
all
with
right.
another segment of the M Squared Techcast.
You gotta love live TV. You just never know. So, and we have back with us again for a repeat appearance, Fred Brown, our infectious disease expert, and he has been scaring the bejesus out of us now for about 2 months, and but he's saying things that I'm not hearing other people saying, which we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I know that you were showing me some of the slides you want to introduce at some point here. But really the issue is, I guess, how to test employees when they come back to work, or at least maybe even at the door before they walk through the door to come back to work. Because the last thing you want is somebody to come in and infect everybody, and then you have to shut down, right?
Yeah, that's right. It turns out the way this the virus spreads, it's got a very low what they call K value, and K value means clustering. And unfortunately, it means that one person. We talk about replication of a virus, and that means how much it replicates when one person has it and gives it to the next person and the next person. And we talk about that pretty simply as well. It's probably around 2.5 to 3 for this in this case. And that means that one person infects 2.5 to 3 people when they get the disease. And that means that, of course, the virus spreads. And what we're trying to do is get the R value below 1. Now, there's another factor that we haven't really talked about called K value. It's the clustering value. And that means that actually 1 to 3.5 doesn't really work in real life. What turns out to be the case when you get very low, in this case, we think it's about a 0.1 K value, which is very low. It means that one person tends to spread the disease a lot. So you have a lot of infected people who don't spread the disease at all, and then one person gives it to 100 people or 200 people, or one location or one event will give it to 1 or 200 people, and that'll cause the overall value to be R 2.5. But the real factor was that one or two events, or the 1 or 2 persons, the 1 or 2 locations that really drove the numbers high.
So, Fred, why are some people super spreaders and some people are not? Why is that the case?
Boy, that is $1 billion question. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
We're trying to figure it out, and one of the ways we do that is with this contact tracing. So after you get the test, you then trace to see who else you've talked to, and then you can find out whether you're a super spreader or whether you're a location you were at was a super spreading location, or whether the activity you did was a super spreading activity. And we're starting to find that some activities are much more likely to spread disease than others. And unfortunately, in rioting, when you're and protesting, I shouldn't say rioting. When we're protesting, we're quite close together, and we're shouting, which is what you want to do, and make your voice heard. And of course, that really tends to spread the virus a lot. So I'd encourage people really to wear masks as much as you can if you're going to be out and about, because it's going to be quite a bit of potentially virus in the air. Every breath you take, it gives out about 3,000 bits of virus particles if you're infected. And if you're shouting or singing or active, it can give as much as 20,000 bits of virus a breath, and all you need is about 1,000 bits to get infected. So you can get a sense of the activity level that you're doing. It's human to human is mostly why this spreads, and these super spreaders, super activities are the reason that we're so worried. And so work activities, obviously, as an opportunity for super spreading. You might become a super spreader location, or the activities you're doing at work might become a super spreading activity, or you might be unfortunate enough to be in a super spreader environment. And so what we're doing now is we're starting to test people and then trace them to understand what's causing the super spreading.
So the auto industry is slowly reopening, but I think they've taken a lot of safeguards from what I've heard from various people, with plastic shields between stations, people wearing masks, people wearing gloves. But we won't really know. I mean, I think it's this week when they're really starting to gear back up, or maybe it was last week. But it'll take a couple of weeks for us to see how well that's really working, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I have worked with a few manufacturing plants to try to reduce, especially early days when we were really concerned about keeping these essential plants working. So one of the plants that I was working with actually was producing large ventilating equipment, which was very critical for keeping people alive. And they really wanted to know what the best practices were. And we developed a few good practices. And I'm happy to take through some of the steps that we did in order to protect the workers there.
Yeah, go right ahead.
We had about 300 workers. This is in Rhode Island and Massachusetts area. And we were actually trying to expand because we needed more ventilators, not less. We were actually expanding at the time. And we had initially one shift. We had all the executives, all the engineers, all the plant workers at the plant. And the first thing we did was we talked to the executives and the engineers and said, do you really need to be at the plant? And they said, actually, we don't actually have to be in the plant all the time. In fact, we don't have to be at the plant much at all frequently. There are a few of them had to be on the plant, but a lot of them didn't. And so we actually got about 40% more plant space out of all those old offices that were then vacated, and they're still vacated today. The executives are all off-site working, engineers still off-site working. They come in every once in a while if they absolutely have to, but those desk spaces, those desks, it became actually part of the manufacturing operation. We were able to get about 40% more plant space out of that than was originally planned, which was great. The other thing we did was we took a look quickly at the workers. Now, if you're talking about young, healthy workers, they're not at a much lower risk than us older guys are. And unfortunately, in this case, we had a lot of older expert people assembling these devices, and so we tried to figure out how we could place them, either get them off-site, encourage them to work off-site, see if we could give them different kinds of roles. And have them train, the new people to come in, or to see if we couldn't put them in a more remote part of the environment so they are better protected. And so that's the other thing we did, as far as trying to get more space, trying to keep the people separated from people who could work off-site and people who had to work on-site. Now, with the people who had to work on-site, we had to train them on new hygiene. And so hopefully, if you're working at a place, and they'll be sending out new standard operating procedures and new hygiene rules. And the first thing we wanted to do was make sure that before you enter the plant, you actually were tested with a thermals test to make sure you didn't have a temperature. That was 88% of the cases, people who have temperatures associated with COVID. It's a symptom of COVID, and 88% of the cases. So we looked at that. And we were, we do this every day for every shift. Now, if you think about it, getting 150 people spaced 6 feet apart and getting them through a 30-second to a minute thermal scan takes time. Mm-hmm. And so we had to stagger the shifts, and we started having guys come in at staggered shift levels, and it took us about an hour and a half to load up the whole plant. So you want to have enough time so that you don't have a mad crush at the door. Everyone trying to get in at 7:30 so they can get out at 4:30 or whatever the shift schedules are. So we tried to ramp that out so that we could start at the plant and keep it going, and then we should shut it down at the end of the day to do a deep cleaning at the end of the day. We went from one shift to 2 shifts because I actually doubled our capacity, not because not because we needed the extra space. We had enough space, actually, it turns out. The spacing is sort of interesting. If you do the math, if you're absolutely perfect, you can do 6-foot spacing in a normal room but it takes away about 52% of the space. So it takes away 48% of your space if you're doing it right. That's a lot of space to lose, so you have to really think through how much distancing you want to do, how dangerous it really is, and so on, pretty carefully. We checked all the ventilation. We made sure HEPA filters were being removed and changed often, but we still have quite a bit of airflow in the production area when we can. The problem is we're assembling chips and things like that don't really like a lot of airflow. So we had to balance that carefully. But I think we're doing a pretty good job there. So that was the first thing, was just figuring out how to get the shift staggered and how to get people into the building safely. And they have to be tested before they enter the building. So we had a parking lot, luckily, and we encouraged workers to come at a certain time with an app, and they would come at their appointed time, and they'd be able to get right through without waiting in line by waiting in their cars. So that's what we did, a lot of work in the cars. We also shut down the cafeteria. We had a nice cafeteria. And we decided, let's let everyone take their breaks and do the cafeteria work in their cars. So we're doing that in the cars. It's not that popular, but it does mean you're keeping that distance right, because our canteen was really tight in that particular case. And so we decided we would we bring the food in for all the workers, which is nice, so they get a free meal, which is good, and they like that. But we have them eat it in their cars. So that's sort of the in and out, and there was no exceptions. I mean, if you were the CEO of the whole place, you still went through the line. You still, had your temperature station. Everyone went through the same area. So that was important. We also, if you go to a place of high infection rate, not for this plant in particular because it was out in the countryside, but for example, a partners group, if you go on their website, they have something called their pre-screen test, and they got 75 partners is the largest healthcare system in Massachusetts. I work with them also, and they every day 75,000 people come in and out of those hospitals and healthcare facilities, and we don't have any outbreaks. And the reason we don't is because there's an app that's other people can download too. If you're owning a business, you can actually download this app. We made it open to everybody, and you can actually have every worker check off whether they have any symptoms of COVID. And if they have symptoms, we say, go get a test and quarantine until you have until you have an answer for a period of time that's necessary. And usually that's about. Usually we want to see no temperature for 3 days.
How many people are working at that particular plant?
At that plant, 300.
And that's both shifts?
That's both shifts, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it gives you a sense. It was a mid-sized operation. It was a workstation operation. So a lot of the manufacturers have the additional challenge of, these guys are walking around, they're carrying heavy loads, they're having to type in to the same machine frequently as their partners. In those cases, the next thing we did after we got people into the plant was we tried to figure out which processes were the most dangerous. Which ones really require people to work together, work closely, work not closely, which ones could be removed. And for the ones that we couldn't socially distance, then we really had to figure out the PPE carefully. And so hopefully you're working with the groups that are going to watch your movements, are going to look at what you're doing, are going to try to help you with the right protective equipment all the time. Certainly everyone who was in those situations actually had a higher level mask. We got them an N95 mask, so just a normal cloth mask. We gave them frequently protective clothing and goggles, as well as face shields frequently, so that they really were protected. We also had those people who had to work in clusters stay in clusters. So we didn't let them, move around the plant a lot. We had workstation guys, who were on a shift. If you had 10 people on a shift, on a particular workstation, we'd have those people stay together all the way through the day. And before the next group came in, we'd make sure we deep clean, so the next group of 10 cohort people would be able to come in and not see their other cohorts. Otherwise you get both those groups sick. One cohort, they start to say, well, let me hand it off the shift. And all of a sudden you got both all your best guys sick doing the same tasks, and then you got a big problem. So we try to actually spend about 20 minutes between the shifts to kind of let the whole place air down a little bit before we got the next shift in that had to do some of the critical tasks.
Now, how long have you been doing that at that particular facility? In other words, have we gone past the 14 days?
Oh yeah, we never shut down. We never shut down the facility. We were considered an essential good. In fact, we were ramping up operations, and we've gone from operations that were producing, say in the hundreds per day into the thousands per day now.
So, and has anyone gotten sick to your knowledge?
Yes, one person got COVID, and they had actually contacted 10 of their workers. Luckily, those workers were quarantined immediately for 14 days, and none of them actually came down with the disease, which was great. The sick person, luckily, seemed to have gotten it. These are tight, local communities who were all working together. so they were working together, and they were, barbecuing together, and they were from family, frequently from large families. And luckily, it didn't spread. So we had we started the process in March 1st, and we were planning it all the way from mid-February. So we planned everything, and it took a couple of weeks to plan everything. And then starting March, we implemented everything with all the new SOPs, all the new operations, and all the new laid out workstations. So we had to shut down for a little while to do that, and then we ramped back up again. And since since for the entire period we've had one person sick out of 300.
And was
That's
that in
pretty-
this country? Because I know you work
Yes.
with
Yes,
wasn't
that was in
wasn't
Massachusetts and Rhode Island.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, on a more broad basis, can you kind of give us an update on where we are with more universal testing and treatments and vaccines? All the
Yeah.
stuff that might give us some hope.
Well, yeah, there's always good reason to hope. So a couple things. First, Merck made a big announcement today. They are getting involved in a big way. They always were involved, but they've been sort of working under the radar. We were always sort of wondering. We've got 6 big vaccine producers in the world today. There's GSK and Takeda. GSK produces adjuvants, and they're going to give their adjuvants away, and they're working closely with Sanofi in a particular trial we can get into in a second. Then there's Takeda, and Takeda's decided not to work in this particular vaccine. But the other 4 are Johnson & Johnson, Sanofi, AstraZeneca, and Pfizer. And those are our big guys. So Merck is one of these big guys, right? And we were wondering where Merck was. Well, they bought a company in Austria that is working on a vaccine that they think they can put onto a vector that they've developed, an adenovector. They developed that was originally actually the measles and what they've done is they've taken the infective part of the measles out, and they've put now a new antigen in there, and that antigen is coming from this little Austrian company. And so that's one route they're trying to go after. And now the measles platform comes and infects and gets that antigen into the cell, then it's going to start to produce antibodies, and we'll get some immunity, hopefully. The second big group, it's not exactly the way it works. I'll talk about exactly how the way it works in a second. The second big thing is they announced they're going to reuse their Ebola platform, which is which is a recombinant RBS platform, and they're going to actually work with a company called IAVA, and IAV is a not-for-profit that has all these interesting pieces of antigen they can also insert into their Ebola vector. So that's the next piece. And then the last piece is they announced they're going to work with a company called Ridgeback to create an antiviral to actually start to impact the virus and hopefully cause it not to be able to reproduce effectively. So those are the 3 big areas that Merck just announced that they were getting into. Simultaneous to that almost was the announcement, of course, of Warp Speed. Now, Warp Speed is this operation that where President Trump has asked for 300,000 doses of a vaccine to be produced by the end of the year. And then anyone signing up for it has to agree that they're going to try to hit this goal, which is a really aggressive goal. And most recently, you heard about the Oxford Bioscience Group working hard on developing a vaccine. Well, AstraZeneca is going to come in on that with them, and they have signed up for Warp Speed, which is going to give them about $1.2 billion to actually try to create these new it's interesting. It's also an adenovirus, a measles construct that they're using with Oxford's special antigen.
Interesting.
So yeah, so there's a lot going on in the vaccine space, and we're gonna, I think, see some interesting results. We saw some initial results that we talked about briefly. We're going to start to see the important results coming out kind of in September timeframe. The important results are we've gotten through phase 2, because phase 2, they actually have to decide what the dosing is and whether the vaccine is safe. Then you start to decide whether the vaccine is efficacious in phase 3. So those are but phase 2 is the one that really kills vaccines. Only about 11% of vaccines that are for novel viruses get through phase 2. Phase 3 is much easier, but it takes a lot more time.
So speaking of time, what are we looking at? Do you think before realistically we have a vaccine that we can distribute to the world? Another year from now, maybe?
Yeah, so that's a hard question. Usually vaccines take a long time to develop. I mean, I'm talking 20 years, 30 years. If
Ooh.
you're on, yeah, on average.
I don't think
on
Matt and
average,
I will
it
be
takes
around
15
that long.
Yeah.
on average, it takes 15 years, and in this case, people are trying to do it in 12 months. So
Yeah.
it's a shocker. And the reason that we think we can do it are a couple reasons. First, some people think we can do it. I think it's going to be a little bit longer than 12 months. Unfortunately, I wish I could say. I think I kind of did all the math, and the fastest I could get there was about 19 months from May. So it gives you a sense of
From May.
Yeah.
So that's the end of 2021 then.
Yeah.
Happy New Year 2022 then. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
All right.
and even that's extremely fast, and everything has to go perfectly. The people who are saying we think we can get there earlier are people who are looking at new kinds of vaccines that haven't been proven yet. And what these vaccines, so normally what we do is we take a little piece of the bug, usually it's the spike protein, and it's called truncated spike protein. That's what Sanofi's trying to do. And then they create the vaccine around that, and then your body says, it's a foreign object, and they create a defense against that foreign object. And so when you get the actual vaccine with the same spike protein, it's the same foreign object, and they go after it and they kill it. That's our immune system at work. So it trains the immune system. That's the idea of the vaccine. So that's one way of going after it, is just a piece of the protein. The second way you can do it is actually go after actually have the whole virus. And what they do is they actually attenuate the virus. So they break it down and make it. They kind of make it non-virulent, and they inject that in. Now the benefit of doing that is that you get a great response. And you only need one shot. And you don't need to have a very big dose, and you make sure the person doesn't get the disease by really killing the virus, make sure it doesn't work, and then you also give it adjuvant, so you stimulate your system also at the same time, and that creates the immune response. So those are the two basic ways that we have been doing things, either giving little pieces of stuff, little nanoparticles of it, or attenuating it and putting it in. Now these other groups, they actually are injecting the RNA or DNA. And what that does is, instead of injecting the antigen or the piece of the virus itself into you, you're injecting the reproduction of a piece of the virus. So you don't. So then you inject it in, and the virus you make the pieces of the virus, and then you also say, wait a minute, that's not right, and you kill it. And that's the way these new ones are. These RNA DNA approaches, and so it's a different approach. And we've had nothing's ever been commercialized particularly with it. And by the third way, which I talked about, which was the sneaking in using a measles vector, or an RSV vector, or a horsepox vector, or some other vector. You put a little piece of the antigen on and you sneak it in that way. That also has a very good response, and also probably only require one dose. The thing about the RNA DNA is it requires 2 doses. It'll require at least, maybe even 3. It'll require what they call a prime. So you prime up the immune system, and then you boost it. What's nice about that is you can mix and match a little bit sometimes. So you can prime with one compound and boost with another. You have to be careful, but you can do that, so you don't have to have quite as much manufacturing capability up front. So there's some mixes and matches that you might be seeing coming out, depending on what we see these results as being. So it's an exciting time, and that's the reason that people think they can get down a little bit faster, is because they're using a new approach that's not as tricky to show that it's safe. Right, because if you're just injecting a piece of DNA, that's one thing. If you're injecting an entire spike protein or attenuated virus into somebody, that's a whole other level of safety you got to think about.
Yeah. How about treatments? I mean, there's some viral diseases we still don't have a vaccine for HIV, but there are pretty effective treatments these days. So I mean, is there any hope for a treatment for this? Before we get the vaccine?
Yeah, in fact, we saw there are two. So there's directly attacking the virus treatments, and then there are ways of attacking what the virus destroys treatments, right? So if you're getting ARDS, or if you're acute respiratory syndrome, or if you're having kidney failure, there are drugs for that. But now attacking the virus itself is what you're talking about, and there are kind of 2 approaches. The first approach is you try to give people antibodies plasma antibodies, or now they're finding monoclonal antibodies, that they kind of are in the system. You inject in, they're in the system, and they sort of glom up they sort of attach themselves and make the virus, very ineffective. It can't get into your cells anymore because it's got so many proteins around it. And so that's one approach. Now, I've been working with some groups who are doing that work, and unfortunately, we're not seeing as many good, what they call neutralizing antibodies as we'd like to see. So this is sort of has been a difficult one so far. We've been actually going out to people and saying, you've been infected, you've survived, can we have some of your blood? And we'll spin that blood down. we'll look
We
for
want some of your blood.
You want some of your blood? Just a little bit. Actually, it's a pretty big bag. I shouldn't tell anybody. It's a pretty good size of blood that we want from you, and we spin it all down, and then we look for the antibodies, the IgG, IgA, and so on, antibodies that you've created as a result of those responses. And so far, we found about 3 or 4 really good ones that we think are neutralizing, and we're going to put those together. Now we're developing cells that actually produce these antibodies. Those are monoclonal antibodies, so we don't have to use the polyclonal antibodies, which we just use for prophylactic work and for very, very ill people. With monoclonals, you can produce a lot more of it, and you don't have as big of an immune response as you would with a polyclonal antibody, because it's just a one-shot deal. Then you can start to mix the antibodies also in interesting ways, but that's a ways off. That's probably... the plasma therapy is available right now, and if you have an ill person in the hospital who has access to plasma therapy, I would get it. If you're very, very ill, I think it can be helpful. And then actually 2 years down the road, we'll have these monoclonals. I think that'll be, and Sorrento's just announced 3 of them they think are very strong, and so on. So we're seeing some of that. The other area you want to do is you actually want to stop the replication of, so what you can get in. The monoclonal antibodies didn't work, so now it's in, and you're trying to actually stop it from replicating. Those are the protease inhibitors that were so famous in treating HIV right now. Is we let the virus in, we couldn't avoid it, so now it's in there. Are there drugs that can actually stop the replication of the virus once it's in you? And that's what we do with these protease inhibitors and so on. That's what remdesivir does. That's what the new Ridgeback deal with Merck does. That's what there's a cocktail now that's just come through and actually been approved by China, and we're going to put it on fast track in the United States. It's a cocktail of 3 drugs: beta interferon, lopinavir, and rotenavir, combined with beta interferon. So those it's actually 3 drugs, even though we at level 4 because they've combined one of them already. But at any rate, the lopinavir is already combined with rotenavir. Those 3 come together, and that's we're finding that remdesivir. We did the test in people who were quite ill. It was an open label test, and we found that people were actually able to survive slightly longer, not statistically significant, slightly more. So that's the most important number, but it wasn't statistically significant in the first round of the work. But we did find that it reduced the length of stay in the hospital from 14 days to 10 days. That's in the hospital, though. It's not just, that's it. So that was okay, but it wasn't great. What's interesting about the new cocktail is that actually is for moderately ill people who want to reduce their stays in the hospital. We think we can get that down almost 7 days for moderately ill, which is exciting because there's a lot more moderately ill than there are. There are about twice as many moderately ill as very, very ill in the hospital.
We got about 2 minutes left. So let's talk about those therapies now. Obviously, the vaccine is out of ways, but these therapies that may help minimize the damage, as it were.
Oh, yes. I didn't talk about those. Absolutely. So minimizing the damage, there are 2 big areas of damage. The first one is the ARDS, which is the acute respiratory syndrome issues. And those we're trying to, then you're hearing about, can we give them some heparin? Can we give them some TP? I'm sorry. That's not right. So there are 2 different things. One is the is when you've got thrombolytic issues, and there you got to talk about heparin and TPA, and the other is are there ways of preventing the cytokine storm? And that's the ARDS issue are. The cytokine storm, we're actually looking at a few things. One, things that block the cytokine directly. So there's IL-1 inhibitors, IL-6 inhibitors, one is from Novartis, IL-6 is from Roche, and so on, that actually block the individual interleukins. There's GM-CSF kinds of interventions as well. And that basically calms and resets your immune response so that you don't start eating yourself and immunizing yourself. And the other big thing, as I said, the thrombolytic effects. And they're talking about we're talking about things like TPA and heparin. And finally, we are getting some drugs for kidney failure as well, protect the kidneys. So there's some ways we can protect our organs in this event.
So good news in all of this, right?
There is. And by the way, I wanted to say that so that when you go back to work, we have 4 basic things you can do. One is distance. So you want to make sure you're apart from everybody. Don't sit across from somebody at a desk. That's the worst thing you can do. Make sure you're trying to get your place separated. Second big thing is hygiene. So make sure you're washing your hands every time you're talking with people. And that should probably be on average about 10 times a day.
Wow.
Yeah. Third, make sure that someone's wiping down your desk area and the high contact surface areas about once an hour. Good maintenance, and make sure that you're working in a facility that deep cleans every day. So those things, and so you've got the distance, you've got the hygiene. Then make sure you've got PPE. Make sure you're wearing a mask. Hopefully, your manufacturer will give you a mask. If they don't, make yourself a mask. Make 2 of them and wash it every day, because after 24 hours it should be clean again, cleaned each time. So those are some of the things, and make sure that you're trying to get yourself tested before you get into, or every morning, do a check of the symptoms you've got. And if you have any symptoms, call in and say, I'm concerned I might have the COVID, and then hopefully they'll say, go get it, go get yourself tested. It does we should talk about testing next time, if you like, because it does take some time for the test to be effective. You can't just think you're exposed, you go right and get a test. It takes you about 5 days before you really should have your test done. Unfortunately, you have to sit that time out. If you think you've been exposed but aren't sure, the tests aren't accurate until you get about 4 days out.
All right, so testing next time. I think that'd be a great topic, because a lot of people want to get tested just to see if they have the antibodies.
Absolutely.
We're not allowed to do it unless we're showing symptoms. So it's kind of a circular thing here, so.
We'll talk about that in a lot next time. I promise. That'll be good. That'll be a good discussion.
All right. Thanks, Fred Brown, our epidemiologist extraordinaire. I can do it, so.
And it's fredbrown.com. Very simple. Okay.
Write me a line anytime. Great to see you guys.
All right. Thanks,
Take care, Fred.
Appreciate it.
Next week.
You bet.
All right. That brings us to the end of another show. This has been the M Squared Techcast with Matt Roush
and Mike Brennan.
And you've been watching at mitechnews.tv, Facebook, and PodcastDetroit.com. We'll see you next week.
Well, gosh, you guys. Longer than usual.